Well, I'll try to say that in my community, I'm widely known as a person that gets emotional in about the first 30 seconds of the presentation. And Bob's very kind introduction has made me emotional before I start my presentation. And I'd also like to tell you why it is that my dear friend and colleague, Marshall Sommer, who is the new chairman of the board of the National Organization for Rare Disorders and is also a principal investigator in the NIH Rare Disease Clinical Research Network here at National Children's Hospital, is tonight unable to get away. We were supposed to do a fireside chat together, and that's why the two chairs were up here initially. And he is unfortunately, or fortunately for the patient, with a terminal rare disease patient at National Children's. We wouldn't want him to be anywhere else, so he's unable to make it. So we were going to do a fireside chat that we'd coordinated with Chelsea's help. And so now I'm going to have to do a fireside chat with myself. My wife, Rachel, would say I'm pretty good at talking to myself, so this should go okay. I'm going to play both roles. I'll play Marshall and Ron. And the way we were going to get started is Ron was going to ask Marshall, so Marshall, as a PI in a rare disease clinical research network, you're dealing with patients and families every day. What would you say is the primary impact of regenerative medicine already? And what would you predict might be the most powerful impact of regenerative medicine in the near to midterm? And Marshall would have said, I believe, I didn't get a chance to get his notes, but I believe he would say that, and without any reservation, that there are only, of the 7,000 rare diseases roughly, there are only about 500 that have any treatment at all. And those 500 and the other 6,500 have really been advancing therapeutic candidates that at best could be expected to provide incremental improvements, not regenerative medicine, not things that would be curative or even profoundly beneficial. And you all know how difficult it is to conduct a clinical trial when you're at best expecting incremental improvement, incremental benefit, that's so hard to measure. You know, you've spent, I've been in this space for 20 years, and we've spent a lot of that 20 years trying to find biomarkers, trying to find very sensitive endpoints that will detect those incremental improvements. Very difficult to do if you're not going to be profoundly beneficial. And so many opportunities are lost, so much time is spent trying to find an endpoint that will detect that incremental improvement in fatigue or increased energy levels and so forth. Very difficult things to measure. And so I think Marshall would have said the most profound benefit thus far is to give us all target therapeutic candidates that will profoundly change and modify the disease progression, not just slow it down, but change the disease, modify the disease progression entirely, to be curative, in a word. As compared to those difficulties in measuring success in incremental improvements, we all heard Scott Gottlieb today. I was just amazed at his clarity and boldness in saying that in this era that this organization has helped inspire and advance, when you've got profoundly beneficial treatments at the ready, crossing the clinical threshold, no longer will it be clinical efficacy that will be the tough part. Wow, you're going to be looking at manufacturing processes to get these profoundly beneficial therapies to all of our patients. What a profound impact on the work that we all do. So I think that's what Marshall would have said. He might not have gotten as emotional as I do. But my second question for him was going to be, so you see these patients and their families every day. You're introducing to them the concept of regenerative medicine and the potential impact on their lives of those medicines. What are they asking you about? in that regard. And I know his answer would be that they're asking when do they get to participate in a regenerative medicine trial. I can tell you that in our organization, the Friedreich Ataxia Research Alliance, we have recruited a good number of phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 clinical trials with these potentially incremental improvement therapeutic candidates. And we recruit those trials in a matter of a few hours. And even though there are 70 to 100 patients across 3 to 6 sites across the country and around the world, we recruit those trials we did the last one in 2 hours and 37 minutes. And the phones were ringing off the hook, and the PIs had to say, there's already a waiting list. Call FARA and tell them to shut it down. So you can imagine how quickly we'll recruit a regenerative medicine trial. The recruitment and enrollment will not be an issue when we crank up these regenerative medicine trials. And the bottom line for our patient families is that's what they're asking. They're asking, when can I get involved in a regenerative medicine trial, a gene therapy trial? We now have 4 companies and 2 universities advancing very aggressively a gene therapy program in our disease, and all of our patients are saying, when do I get to go? And so that has helped change the whole complexion of the rare disease space that began with patients being isolated and hopeless. Then with the work of a lot of our patient organizations like ours, they became hopeful. Now they are absolutely confident. All they want to know is, when do we get it? So thank you all for doing that. So then Marshall was going to ask me a couple of questions. And his first one was going to be, so how did you get involved in patient advocacy? And I'll try to not get emotional here, but I'm not confident I'll be able to do that. I got involved beginning in 1997. 1997, when my wife Rachel's and my 3 stepsons included the middle stepson named Keith, who at age 11 was diagnosed with Friedreich's ataxia. And as some of you know, I think Friedreich's ataxia is a very condemning prognosis. Our diagnosis, and we knew our son was going to get very sick very fast. We knew he was going to lose some vision, hearing, and speech capability. We knew he'd get severe scoliosis requiring medical implantation of metal rods to get and keep his spine straight. We knew he'd have a much increased risk of diabetes. We knew he would lose strength and coordination in all 4 extremities. So he'd be in a wheelchair most likely by his mid-teens. And most condemningly, he would have a severe heart condition that began with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy and ended with congestive heart failure. So we sat down at our computer, and before Google existed, and this would have been, as I said, in 1997, and we found some distressing factors. We found that there was no organization devoted entirely to Friedreich ataxia research. We found that there was precious little research being funded. We could find only 3 scientists that had been given grants to study our disease in the previous year. We saw there were no clinical trials. We saw there were no clinical interest. There were no pharmaceutical entities interested in our space. They all said to me, "You're too rare, you're on your own." But very promisingly, and this is really apropos of this alliance, we found that the gene had been identified almost a year to the day earlier. So in March of '96, a team had identified the gene and its mutation. And we put, those 3 negative factors and that 1 positive factor together and got something close to 4, we think. In that we said, if we could establish a foundation, raise enough in the way of awareness and resources, maybe the time is right that we could make a difference. So we decided to, devote our energies to establishing the Friedreich Ataxia Research Alliance. Marshall's next question was going to be, so how did your experience on Capitol Hill influence your decisions and your work going forward? And I would have said, Marshall, it had a profound impact on me. The most profound I can think of is the fact that I met my future wife, Rachel, on Capitol Hill. And I met her 3 sons of her first marriage on Capitol Hill. Our offices were right across the hall from one another, and we met in the hall. So that was in 1991. Our son Keith, 3 years later, at age 11, was diagnosed with Friedreich's ataxia. And so if you combine the ultimate influence on our work of that experience on Capitol Hill would be combined with the fact that I'd already spent, as Bob's very generous introduction indicated, about 15 years in executive branch agencies like State Department, the CIA, and so forth. And that combination of executive branch and legislative branch experience, gave Rachel and me the confidence that we could do something about it, and the actual commitment that we would do something about it. So that was the impetus that was added by that government experience. And also we knew about 30 to 45 minutes from both the NIH and the FDA. We said, we're in this spot. We think we should do something about this. And took us about a year to assemble a board of directors consisting of 7 parents like ourselves, and 1 adult patient, and 3 promising scientists, 2 of whom had helped identify the gene, and put the foundation together. Marshall was then going to ask me, so you obviously spend a lot of your energy and time working with all the stakeholders, and that's how we roll. We always never take no for an answer, and we're going to work with anybody and everybody in the field that's interested in our disease. So I'd say the first lesson learned was that, and it was intuitively obvious to us, brand new organization, very small disease, only 3,000 to 5,000 American patients, maybe 15,000 worldwide. No way we could do it on our own. It's going to take a village big time. It's going to take several villages big time. So we decided from the get-go, you work with everybody in the field. We had 3 slogans: collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. Secondly, if you are at all interested in Friedreich's ataxia and we're not working with you, it's because we haven't found you, but we will. And finally, acting alone, there's precious little we can accomplish, while acting together, there's precious little we will not accomplish. So we set out, we knew our first collaborator, our first partner had to be the patients and their families. We knew from the beginning that it would be the trust and the confidence that the patient community and their families established in FARA that would account for any success we would be able to accomplish. Secondly, we worked with academic investigators. We knew from the 3 that we put on our board initially, I asked one of them, who was our scientific director, what can we best do to advance the field among the investigators? Easy, Ron, get us together. We've never gotten together. There had never been an international scientific conference for Friedreich's ataxia. She said that's our first task. We organized, within about 5 months, we organized the world's first international scientific conference for our disease. We gathered 80 scientists, 65 from around the world, the other 15 from the NIH. The common rule was you had to be able to spell Friedreich's ataxia to come to that first international conference. And we also began to fund those scientists, and we began to insist, absolutely demand their collaboration. I'll never forget at the first scientific conference, which would have been the following year, 1998, crowded around that big conference table at the NIH Building 31C. I bet half the people in this room have been in that room. You heard scientists say, "Wow, it's great to hear your presentation. I love your work. I've been reading your paper for 3 years." And right away, the alarm bells went off in our heads. It's not good enough. If you're reading the guy's paper, you're about 18 to 24 months behind the power curve. We want you on each other's papers, not reading each other's papers. So that got that started. Then we started also at the same time working with our government partners. Initially, it was premature to go to the FDA, but the NIH became our passionate partner. As Bob's introduction indicated, I've been able to serve on now 2 advisory councils, National Advisory Council. First one, the Neurological, NINDS, the Neurological Institute for Neurological Disorders and Stroke, and served on that advisory council for 4 years. And now I'm on the NCATS Advisory Council and the Cures Acceleration Network Review Board, which I co-chair. And we knew the Congress would be important to us. So those were our 3 principal government partners that we targeted. Finally, we knew the industry partners would be interested and be essential to any progress we'd be able to accomplish. Although at the first international conference, we invited a lot of industry partners. None of them came because, again, they thought we were too rare. We were on our own. But over time, for the following reasons, that equation has changed drastically. And the following reasons are that we were able to build enough in the way of resources and awareness to provide the infrastructure the industry needs. Namely, there's nothing more important to us or the industry or the FDA than natural history studies, the natural history databases. We have a very robust natural history database, about 1,200 patients over as much as a dozen years, without intervention, unfortunately. We're looking forward to that first intervention. We have a very active clinical trial network consisting of clinicians and their nurse coordinators all over the world that we're supporting, that know our disease, know our patients, and our industry partners know they can conduct their clinical research at those sites. And we have a very active and the largest patient registry in the world that we use to recruit those clinical trials in a few hours. So we also realized that in this town, most of you know, it's all about relationships. So we've spent 20 years building relationships at the NIH, the FDA, and the Congress that are serving us very well. And now, I think it was Nicole Boyce who said at our committee meeting this morning that, we've really changed, and the way I'd put it is we've changed over the last few years from the old buzzword was patient-centric. Things had to become patient-centric. Then the buzzword was changed to patient-focused. And now I think you would all agree that it's patient-led clinical research. Thank you. Yeah. So we often go to the Congress, as this alliance will do tomorrow morning, and we work constantly on both the policies that will be effective for all of our patient groups and all of our industry partners, and we work on the budget on behalf of both the NIH and the FDA. So our constant message there is give these 2 organizations the resources they need because a rising tide will float all boats. We never go to the Hill and say, I've never gone to the Hill and said, put more money in the NIH and the FDA budgets so that Friedreich's ataxia will prosper. I always go and say, and I've been able to testify before the appropriators a couple of times, give the NIH and the FDA resources the resources they need to clear the regulatory pathway and to increase the basic research and clinical research pathway so that all of our diseases prosper and that we get treatments and cures for all of our patients. And then I'll finish up by going right to the FDA, and I'll say that organizations like ours spend a lot of our time and energy with that relationship. We've been to any number of pre-IND meetings invited by our sponsors. We've been to any number of milestone meetings, and some have even been to, and we're looking forward to the first opportunity to go to a advisory committee meeting. We don't have an advisory committee meeting yet because we haven't had an NDA or a BLA application. And so we also have conducted our externally led patient-focused drug development meeting. You heard Brent talk about that at some length today. Ours was phenomenally successful, just as yours was. We had a lot of FDA participants, and they heard our patient's voice loud and clear. I've had several conversations with people like Billy Dunn, the director of the Neurological Products Review Division, who has said publicly that meeting had such a powerful emotional and scientific impact on him and his review division that it has changed the way they are conducting their business with our disease group. And that's not just our disease group. It's true of all these disease groups that are having these very important and impactful meetings. I'd go to CBER and say, the organization, the review division is so important to you guys, or all of us. Dr. Wilson Brine, I bet you 90% of you know who he is, the director of the Tissues and Advanced Therapies Review Office there that will be reviewing all of our gene therapy and regenerative medicine applications. He gave the keynote speech at our externally led patient-focused drug development meeting on June 2nd of last year, and he told the group, the hundreds of people that were in the room and online, and his FDA colleagues, how an FA patient had changed his life. And you combine that with the things we've heard from Billy Dunn talking to our sponsors as well, that these meetings are changing the way they are doing their business with our disease groups. So I'll just conclude Marshall's and my comments by saying that I hope you will agree after today's session that patient advocacy organizations are making a real difference for you. They're making a real difference in a variety of ways. We're coordinating NIH support for your basic and translational research and even some of your clinical research. We've conducted several clinical trials right there at the clinical center at the NIH, and then migrated those products to some of your pharmaceutical partners. So we're really changing the landscape at the NIH. Our organizations around the country are also changing the landscape at the FDA. We are greatly reducing the uncertainties that you all used to face in the regulatory pathway. I remember asking a sponsor panel at a meeting several years ago, what can we best do as patient advocates to help you advance our therapeutic candidates? Without hesitation, they said, remove the uncertainties in the regulatory pathway. Trust me, we are doing that. By going to all these meetings, conducting all these meetings, and hearing these review division directors say, it's marvelous what you're doing. They want it to succeed. They want us to succeed together. I've heard review division directors apologize publicly for not having an approved treatment for our disease. And so I just wish we could all submit our NDAs and BLAs tomorrow while the time is right. These people are all in for all of us. And so that's the way your patient advocacy organizations have helped you advance the therapeutic products for our patients. So I'll conclude with that. And thank you very much for advancing regenerative medicine is so important to all of our disease groups.